Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am once again continuing my horror-themed builds as we get closer and closer to Halloween this year. I have made Jason from Friday the 13th, Ghostface from Scream. I have made Hannibal Lecter's bite mask from The Silence of the Lambs, and this week I kind of felt like I needed to pay homage to the Michael Myers series Halloween.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, not that. Different Myers. A lot of people suggested that I make the mask from it, but I don't really know a lot about latex, and I don't know that I have the materials on hand to do it justice. So I asked my Patreon members for suggestions. One of them suggested that I make his escape mask from the Rob Zombie Halloween, I believe that released in 2007. A lot of people disliked that movie. It deviated a lot from the original storyline. I rewatched it just to refresh my memory, and I thought it held up pretty good. Maybe some of you like it, maybe some of you don't. But in that, when he's trapped in the insane asylum, he builds a lot of masks in his spare time, as seen whenever they go into a cell. They're like all on the walls. Literally, he's like a prop maker in the making. And I thought, why not make one of those? In particular, in that movie, he makes a orange-looking mask that kind of looks like it's out of construction paper. It is the one he's wearing when he escapes from the asylum in basically the middle of the movie. So today we are making Michael Myers' escape mask from Halloween 2007. Let's get to building! So for this build, I just kind of freehanded the template. I figured it was simple enough shapes that I could figure it out as I went and really guess. I realize his masks in the movie are paper mache, but I like the patience for layers of newspaper dipped in water and flour slurry to then wait and dry, so I'm just going to build my base out of 6mm EVA foam and finish it to look like paper mache. The big drawback to freehanding is I won't really know if my parts are right until I've actually built the thing, foreshadowing. But I will show you how to attack that in a little bit. If you would like this template or any of my templates, they are always free and linked in the description below the videos. I add some more guesswork here. Keep in mind, when I say I'm guessing, I have hundreds of builds under my belt, all with made patterns, so I have a little bit of practice making them. I actually have a video specifically about pattern making that I will link in the description below if you're interested. So I trace my pattern onto some 6mm foam and cut it out. All the markings on my patterns are explained in the cover letter of the template, but here's a general breakdown. The sizes for the foam is listed on each part. Blue highlights mean a 45-degree angle inward, green lines mean outward 45, and the red lines are areas that get overlays. That little orange line is going to be a slit cut on the backside. U-shaped marks on the edges are registration marks, and the large V is a dart, which will help to make the flat area a curve. To help my seam lines not pull from each other so much and get the foam closer to its final shape, I heat up the material with a heat gun. Generally mine is set from somewhere around 500 to 600 degrees, which is about 3 to 4 times hotter than a typical hairdryer can get. I heat up the foam and push it over a round object. My go-to is this glass dome meant to cover my back porch light. As the foam cools, it'll retain the shape it's being forced onto, and if you're super coordinated, you can try and hold a piece on the object while heating another piece up. Extra skill points if you can do it without blasting your hand and making burns from the superheated air. With only 5 parts to assemble, it's relatively easy. I put contact cement on all the edges, the overlay areas, and the corresponding attachment points on the back side of the parts. Once the contact cement is no longer wet to the touch, it's ready to tack together. During this section of the build, it's where I realize how close my freehand guesswork is and what it should be. Probably the biggest issue I can spot as parts get smushed together is that I made the mask way too big. If you are going to make it, I would suggest scaling it down to maybe 85 or 90%, and that's if you got a big head like me. I have a video on how to scale masks that I'll leave also in the description below to help you with sizing to fit a normal size face. Here I'm going to show you some corrections that I needed to make to the mask. The forehead protrudes out a little too far, which I know means that in the middle seam at the top needs a wedge cut out of it. I cut the wedge out, contact cement it up, and while I wait for the glue to set up, I adjust my pattern to match my alteration. I also had to bring the lower jaw up, so I went ahead and marked that as well while I was at it. Since I already showed you how to fix mistakes, I figured why not show you another mistake that I made for this video. My initial thought was that I could just decoupage on the construction paper. I roughed up the surface to give it a little grit to cling to, busted out my Mod Podge, proceeded to glue down crumpled up pieces of orange construction paper. The problem with this is that the Mod Podge takes a while to set up, and as I'm pulling and pushing over the contours of the mask, portions are being pulled smooth. After a few minutes of trying to force it into submission, I rethink my gluing options. Super glue is an option, but it usually discolors papers and fabrics and other things, so I didn't want that. I don't know how well spray adhesive or contact cement would hold up, so I decided to try hot glue on a scrap piece of foam and found it to be my best option. With using hot glue, I can slowly work in sections around the mask, get the crumple paper how I wanted it to, and just hold it there to cool. I was fairly surprised with how well it held onto the foam and the paper. Now, this method of covering foam with construction paper does mean that it will not have a full contact with the surface, so there will be some voids in there in the crumplage. I'm using a low temp glue gun so I can work a little faster and so I don't burn my hands. Parts that didn't get fully covered can easily be patched over by tearing off small pieces and gluing them down. The mask kind of looks like that in the movie anyway, so it works to my advantage. I know there are anti-fading paper options out there, but this cheap construction paper from the dollar store that I am using will get lighter and lighter over time, as well as more brittle. To combat that issue, I'm going to use 2 or 3 layers of a matte finished Mod Podge over the top of it. It'll add a little bit of a shine to it, but will seal the paper. The hot glued down paper with the Mod Podge coating over the top actually made this mask a lot more rigid. Once covered, I let it dry for a couple of hours. I did do just a little bit of painting with the acrylics. You may see it if you look close, and I didn't record it. I had a little bit darker orange under some of the areas where there were overhangs, and I lightly dry brushed on a lighter orange onto the high points. It's pretty subtle. The strapping, from what I can tell from the movie, looks like he used a shoelace. So I went into my closet, got an old shoelace, drilled 2 holes in the mask, one on each side, and tied it on. I reinforced my knots with super glue so that they will stay shut. And I made the string adjustable by tying it back on itself. This way you can slide it to tighten it. Think of it kind of like those old school friendship bracelets we used to get where you pull the knots tight on your wrist. Same basic concept. And with that, I am done with this mask that looks like a 5-year-old or a 20/30 something year old serial killer made in solitary confinement. I have one more build before Halloween of this series, and it should be a good one. Maybe something Texas related. And we are finished. Here is the end result. It is very large. It's probably a little bit oversized. I would say if you were wanting to make this yourself, scale it back to about 85% or so, and that should fit the average person. This is even bigger for a big head like me, but overall I think it turned out pretty good, and I was relatively surprised at how nice the construction paper made it even more rigid. I thought it was going to just kind of fall apart. I would suggest putting something over the top of it, because if you get just regular construction paper, it does fade over time and becomes a little more brittle and stuff. I feel like this is going to lock it in and kind of keep it safe for at least a little bit. But yeah, maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to pull something from a random Halloween movie and creep the mess out of people. Yeah, like that guy. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. I'll let you put it on. It's the nice thing to do. Here you go. All right, let's go trick-or-treating, man. Get some candy. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.